When I set out to reflect on the film Titanic, I do not approach it merely as a spectator fascinated by a love story cut short by tragedy. I observe it as an analyst of the collective unconscious, attentive to the hidden forces that drive not only individuals but also the masses. For me, this film is not just fiction, but an archetypal representation of human drives, illusions, and the inevitability of fate. The first image that comes to mind is the ship itself. Grand, imposing, sold to the world as unsinkable. The Titanic is the perfect portrait of human narcissism. It represents the illusion that technology, progress, and wealth elevate us above the natural forces of life and death. This excessive pride, which psychoanalysis recognizes as a defense against human fragility, is a repetition of the arrogance I have seen in so many patients who believe themselves immune to collapse, yet carry within them invisible cracks. When the passengers board, we witness a true microcosm of society. On one side, the confident elite adorned with luxury and social masks. On the other, those traveling the lower decks, living in a raw reality where survival is not disguised. The upper and lower decks are not merely levels of a ship, but metaphors for the conscious and the unconscious. Above, order, social varnish. The ideal ego that longs to be seen. Below, instincts, vitality, the raw feast, pleasure without masks. It is within this context that the story of Jack and Rose unfolds. He, a poor young man, full of vitality and spontaneity, represents the life drive, the unconscious still free, not domesticated by social rigidity. She, trapped among luxury and expectations, symbolizes the ego imprisoned, repressed by external and internal demands. Their relationship is not simply a love story, but a profound encounter between the spontaneity of life and the repression of duty. I also perceive that the tragedy of the Titanic carries an unavoidable message. The unconscious always finds a way to emerge. No matter how much the engineers, the wealthy, and the powerful proclaimed absolute safety, nature, this real that escapes human control, tears open the ship as the unconscious tears through the ego's defenses. The iceberg is a perfect metaphor for trauma, mostly invisible, silent, but inevitable, waiting for the moment when overconfidence will lead to collapse. Thus, in this first analysis, I affirm Titanic is, above all, a portrait of human illusions, of vanity that tries to deny fragility, and of the struggle between repressed desires and the need to live fully. We do not merely watch a shipwreck. We witness the collapse of a collective narcissism that believed it could control life itself. As I look deeper into the relationship between Jack and Rose, I see not merely a romance, but a vivid enactment of the structures of the psyche itself. What I described as the ID, the ego, and the superego. Jack is the embodiment of the ID, instinctual, passionate, unrestrained. He lives for the moment, guided not by societal approval but by desire, vitality, and spontaneity. His joy is immediate. His freedom is intoxicating. For men and women alike, Jack represents the unconscious wish to live unbound without the heavy chains of rules, expectations, and inherited traditions. Rose, at the beginning of the story, stands firmly within the world of the superego. Her life is dictated by the commands of authority. Her mother, her fiancé, the rigid codes of high society. She wears beauty and privilege like a cage of gold. Every choice is supervised by the internalized voices of duty, reputation, and fear, shame. She does not belong to herself but to the oppressive expectations of others. Yet, within Rose, the ego struggles. The ego is the mediator, caught between the wild freedom of Jack, the ID, and the suffocating control of her mother and Cal, the superego. Rose's conflict is not simply between two men. It is the psychic battle within all of us. Do we surrender to unrestrained passion? Do we obey the iron law of social duty? Or do we find a way to reconcile both in a life that feels authentically our own? In the film, Rose's attraction to Jack is not merely romantic. It is existential. She is drawn to him because he awakens a part of her psyche that has long been repressed. Her own ID, her own capacity to desire without permission, to laugh without calculation, to live without apology. Their dances, their moment of intimacy, their simple joy on the ship's bow. These are not just gestures of love, but acts of rebellion against the tyranny of the superego. But the superego does not relinquish control easily. Cal, her fiancé, is the perfect symbol of this internal force. Wealthy, rigid, obsessed with control and appearances. He punishes, humiliates, and threatens her, just as the superego punishes us with guilt and shame whenever we dare to defy its dictates. His violence and jealousy are the external reflections of the inner torment that comes from resisting one's imposed obligations. Thus, the story of Jack and Rose is not just a doomed romance. It is the eternal struggle of the psyche itself. The ID calls for freedom, for passion, for life. The superego demands order, control, and obedience. And the ego, fragile and torn, must navigate between them. Risking collapse of balance cannot be found. In Rose's decision to step away from her old life, even at terrible cost, we witness the triumph of the ego, choosing authenticity over submission. She cannot erase the superego, nor can she abandon all reason to the ID. But she learns that to live fully, she must stop existing only for others and start claiming her own life. This, I believe, is why audiences resonate so deeply with Titanic. Beneath the spectacle and tragedy lies a truth each person knows in silence. The inner war between who we are told to be, and who we might yet become. As I reflect upon the tragedy of Titanic, my attention is inevitably drawn to the iceberg. To the casual viewer, it is a mere object, an unfortunate obstacle on the ocean surface. But to the psychological eye, it is a profound symbol, perhaps the most important of the entire narrative. The iceberg is the perfect metaphor for the unconscious and for trauma. What is visible above the waterline is small, deceptive, seemingly harmless. Yet beneath lies a massive, unseen structure, silent and impenetrable. In precisely the same way, repressed memories, unacknowledged fears, and unresolved conflicts dwell within the unconscious. They remain invisible, but they are never inactive. One day they rise, and their impact can shatter the strongest offenses of the ego. Consider the Titanic itself. Praise is unsinkable, wrapped in human pride and overconfidence. It represents the illusion of invulnerability. How many individuals I have treated who constructed their lives in this way. Carefully engineered personas, armored against weakness, designed to project power, wealth, or perfection. But beneath their unconscious, like the iceberg, remain vast, waiting, carrying the weight of truths they refuse to face. Inevitably, the collision comes. The crash of ship against ice is the moment of trauma. It is sudden, violent, and transformative. The defenses of the ego, the steel walls of the Titanic, are pierced. Water floods in, just as the repressed returns with force, invading consciousness, demanding acknowledgement. There is no turning back. Once the repressed is broken through, life can no longer remain as it was. Here we see the genius of the metaphor. The iceberg does not pursue the ship. It simply exists. The danger lies not in the object itself, but in the arrogance of ignoring it. In the same way, trauma need not destroy a life if it is confronted honestly and worked through. But when denied, when dismissed as irrelevant or weak, it waits, inevitable, until the day it collides with the illusions of security we so desperately maintain. In the story, the iceberg ensures the fate of the Titanic. But on the psychological level, it represents the truth that repression cannot be permanent. The unconscious is timeless. What we refuse to face does not disappear. It waits. And when it emerges, it demands a transformation, whether we are prepared or not. I suggest then that the real catastrophe of Titanic is not the iceberg itself, but the blindness of those who refuse to slow down, to prepare, to respect the forces of nature. In this way, the film mirrors life. The tragedies that break us are often preceded by countless ignored warnings, silenced voices, and denied truths. Thus, the iceberg stands as both threat and teacher. It reminds us that beneath every polished surface lies something deeper, unseen, and infinitely more powerful. To deny it is folly. To respect it is wisdom. As I turn my gaze toward the final chapters of Titanic, I find myself compelled to reflect on the death of Jack. To many, it is a scene of pure tragedy, an unnecessary loss, a cruel twist of fate. But from the perspective of the psyche, Jack's death carries a deeper meaning. It is not merely a plot device. It is a symbolic act of sacrifice and transformation. Jack, as I have said before, represents the ID. instinctual, vital, unrestrained. His energy awakens Rose, liberating her from the prison of her superego. But the idea, if left unchecked, cannot remain dominant forever. For life to continue, the ego must emerge stronger, wiser, capable of integrating desire with responsibility. And so, the idea must in some sense die, or at least recede, for the ego to step into its rightful place. Jack's death, then, is not only a loss for Rose, but also a passage. He gives his life so that she may live. He becomes a sacrifice drive, the passion consumed in the waters of reality, so that Rose could be reborn, not as a puppet of her mother and Cal, nor as a perpetual dreamer clinging to fantasy, but as a woman who has chosen her own life. In this light, Jack's death is a form of initiation. In myth and ritual, we often see the structure. The hero descends, the beloved dies, a sacrifice is made. What follows is transformation. The old self cannot survive if the new self is to emerge. Rose cannot remain the same after this loss. She must confront grief, endure the wound, and in so doing, discover her own strength. There is also in Jack's final act a profound echo of love's truth. To love authentically is not to possess or control, as Cal tried to do, but to give. Jack gives himself fully, without hesitation, without demand of return. His gift is his life, and through this, Rose is liberated to live her own. In psychoanalytic terms, this is a shift from dependency toward autonomy, the recognition that true love empowers rather than enslaves. When Rose clings to the piece of wood, while Jack sinks into the frozen ocean, we witness more than separation. We witness the psyche's painful necessity. That which first awakens us cannot always remain with us. The lover, the guide, the inspiration, sometimes they must vanish, leaving us to carry their gift alone. Jack disappears beneath the waves, but his spirit remains within Rose, shaping her choices, sustaining her courage. Indeed, the proof lies in her later life. She tells her story as an old woman, not as someone broken by tragedy, but as one who lived fully, richly, daringly, precisely as Jack taught her. His death was not an end but a transference. His vitality became hers. Thus, Jack's death is both heartbreak and rebirth. It is a necessary loss that allows the ego to claim its freedom, the wound that compels growth, the darkness that bursts a new light. As I arrive at the final reflection on Titanic, I turn my attention fully to Rose, not the young woman trapped between duty and desire, but the survivor, the bearer of memory, the voice that frames the entire story. For it is through her that we witness not only the sinking of a ship, but also the endurance of the human spirit after catastrophe. Survival is never simple. To live when others perish is to carry a burden, a weight that presses upon the soul. This, in psychoanalytic terms, is the trauma of survival. The unconscious whispers questions that consciousness struggles to answer. Why did I survive? Why not another? What shall I do with this life that remains? Rose embodies this struggle, but she also reveals a path through it. She does not repress Jack, nor the ship, nor the icy night. She remembers. She tells a story. In doing so, she performs the essential psychological task, transforming trauma into narrative, chaos into meaning. The repressed, left unspoken, festers like a wound. But memory, spoken and shared, becomes a bridge between past and present. In her retelling, Rose does not erase pain. She integrates into the fabric of her identity. This is what makes her a symbol of resilience. Resilience does not mean escaping harm or denying sorrow. It means finding within suffering capacity to rebuild. Rose lives not as a shadow of tragedy, but as someone who has drawn strength from it. She becomes, in her own way, the synthesis of ID, ego, and superego. Her desires honored, her responsibilities accepted, her individuality preserved. For men and women in the middle years of life, between 35 and 55, Rose's story carries a profound message. By this stage, one has encountered losses, relationships that ended, dreams that failed, opportunities that passed. The temptation is great to sink with those losses, to let them define you. But Rose teaches another way, to carry memory without drowning in it, to honor what was lost while choosing still to live. The old woman who cast a jewel into the ocean at the film's end is not rejecting her past, but consecrating it. She acknowledges that the story is not a wound to be hidden, but a treasure to be kept within, sacred and transformative. In this way, memory itself becomes an act of liberation. In my work, I have often seen how those who survive great trials emerge with a deeper appreciation for life, freed from illusions that once enslaved them. Rose is one such figure. She is not simply a character in a film. She is the archetype of the human capacity to endure, to remember, and to live beyond the shipwrecks of existence. And so, the true lesson in Titanic is not merely that ships sink or that love is lost. It is that the human spirit, though fragile, is also astonishingly resilient. Through memory, through grief, through transformation, life renews itself. This is a hidden truth of the film, and it is a hidden truth of the psyche. We are wounded, we remember, and yet we go on.